Alright, so this lesson is going to be a review of factoring a quadratic trinomial, so that means 3 terms, when a is greater than 1. So a quadratic trinomial looks like this: ax squared plus bx plus c, kind of that standard form of a quadratic trinomial. However, instead of it being factoring something like x squared plus 5x plus 6, which we can just look and say, oh, what multiplies to 6 and adds to 5, and we would say 2 and 3 multiply to 6 and add to 5, and so we'd write it as x plus 2 and x plus 3. That's not what this video is about. This video is about changing the number in front of the x squared to be something other than 1. And so that's going to be something like this first example, such as 2x squared plus 17x plus 8. And so when you have something like this, you can't actually factor it like this guy over here. This kind of goes out the window. That goes out the window because a over here is 1, and we're looking at something now that has an a value of 2, and so that's different. It's obviously greater than 1. So what I do is, in order to factor this, I do what's called the triangle method. I multiply the first term times the last term, and I get 16x squared. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say what multiplies to 16 and adds to 17. So what multiplies to 16x squared and adds to 17x? Those two things would be 16x and 1x. I'm going to take those two terms and I'm going to actually put them right in the middle. It's a way of breaking up the 17x so that it's going to allow us to factor by a method called grouping. And so it doesn't matter which one you write first. So I'm actually going to write 1x plus 16x. And then you keep the last term the same, plus 8. And you keep the first term the same, 2x squared. Since this is a positive one, we'll put a plus sign there. Now notice that you have 4 terms. And when you have 4 terms right here, you want to factor by grouping. And what that means is that you want to group the first 2 and the last 2. And you're going to take the greatest common factor out of each of those parentheses. So the greatest common factor in 2x squared and 1x is actually going to be just x. And so that is x, and then parentheses, 2x plus 1. Plus symbol will stay, and then the greatest common factor in the second parentheses is 8, so I take out 8, and it leaves me with 2x plus 1. How did I figure out 2x plus 1? You can just divide the greatest common factor into each of these terms, and it'll get you 2x, and it'll get you 1. Alright, so now, this is where the tricky part comes in, sometimes difficult to understand. You have 2 terms, 1 term here and 2 terms there, right? And now in each of those terms there is a 2x plus 1, which you can now take out as your new greatest common factor, and you will only write 2x plus 1. Those will be gone, and it will leave you with x plus 8. Therefore, it is factored like that. Okay? But we got to do some that have negatives involved in them. And so, let's start a second example. We would have 4x squared plus 4x minus 3. When you multiply them together, first and the last terms, that 3 is negative, it'll be negative 12x squared. Since it's negative 12x squared, you got to think what multiplies to negative 12 and adds to positive 4. And so that would be 6 and negative 2. And so 6x and negative 2x would be the actual terms that you want to use. When one is positive and one is negative, my advice to you is to put the negative one first. So minus 2x and then plus 6x. The last one stays the same, minus 3. First one stays the same, 4x squared. And so then you want to group them together and take out the GCF. The GCF in this one is going to contain both numbers and variables, so it'll be 2, because 2 is divisible by both 4 and 2, and then an x also, leaving you with 2x minus 1 plus, and then you want to take out 3, and then it'll leave you with 2x minus 1. Once again, notice the parentheses are the same, so you can take it out, and your final answer is 2x minus 1 times 2x plus 3. And it's factored. The third and final one is going to be what happens when both terms, when you do the triangle part, and you say what multiplies to the first and adds to the or multiplies to the top and adds to the middle. What happens when both of those are negative? Alright, so example 3 would look like this. 5x squared minus 7x plus 2. So when we multiply them together, we get 10x squared. Positive number that they have to multiply to, but they add to a negative. And so what two numbers multiply to 10 but add to negative 7? That would be negative 5 and negative 2, but we're going to put our x on each one. So negative 5x and negative 2x. When you have this case, you can't put a negative first because both are going to be negative, so it doesn't matter which order you put them in. So you'd have 5x squared minus 5x minus 2x plus 2. And when you group these together, you're going to have to do it in a very careful way. The first two you can group just fine, but the second two, you actually need to group this minus sign that is there. You need to group that into the second group. Then you do the greatest common factor, just as before. So in the first one, it's a 5x. Take out the 5, take out an x, would leave you with x, and then minus, and then 5 divided by 5 is 1, so x minus 1. And in the second group, the reason this one's a little bit trickier is because since the minus sign is in the middle, you actually need to factor out a negative. So normally the GCF would just be 2, but in this case we're going to make it negative 2 because it will allow for the parentheses to be the same. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 would be just x left, and this plus 2 in this problem divided by negative 2 would now be minus 1. Notice how by taking out the negative 2 I now have the same parentheses, and that's critical, so that my answer could then be x minus 1 times 5x minus 2. And that is the 3 different ways that you would have to factor if a is greater than 1. Alright, have a good day.